Hi, good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for joining us. It's great to see so many familiar faces, colleagues, clients, former colleagues, and some new faces as well. So today we're going to share with you our perspective on artificial intelligence in our webinar called "Cut Through the AI Hype." This is the intro page here. And what we're going to try to do today is really talk a little bit about AI in the context of business strategy and really kind of get a better handle on, um, for example, the case for building a robust AI strategy as part of your business strategy, but importantly, making sure that we don't get carried away or lost in the kind of the hype and disruption that's going on in this particular topic area, which frankly is quite noisy and certainly a difficult area to navigate. Very brief introduction. I'm Matt Tice. I'm the CEO of Insurgence Group. We're a management consultancy and advisory firm focused primarily on helping our clients navigate disruption, but how we do that is largely through strategy, innovation, and leadership work. The work that we do is very diverse, but generally focused on helping organizations grow and improve performance in the face of disruptive change. We have offices in Sydney, New York, and Paris. The business has grown very well over the last 7 or 8 years, particularly with COVID. I suppose if you're going to have a firm focused on disruption in a period of significant change, that's always quite helpful. So as we get started, I just want to sort of set us up and make sure that we have a grounding in the terminology, which I'm going to make a broad assumption that most of us understand AI, at least at a high level. There are a number of different parallel disciplines in AI, and those disciplines are very quickly subdividing into a group of smaller and smaller and more focused disciplines, which I'll touch on briefly in a moment. But broadly, the six meta areas of AI include machine learning, neural networks, robotics, expert systems, fuzzy logic, and probably most of the AI that most of us here are going to be familiar with is natural language processing or generative AI, um, which is where ChatGPT and Bard and other AI tools that are kind of in the mainstream sort of live. So these disciplines are not necessarily mutually exclusive. They do overlap, but I will have a general kind of anchor to natural language processing AI, generative AI, in this discussion today. However, we will touch on some of the others as we go forward. Now, to start off, why do we need to build AI into your strategy? Well, the most important sort of two or three things are: first, your competition is moving ahead really quickly, and if you're not staying in touch or at least with the pack, you fall the risk of falling behind very quickly. And of course, also your customers are embracing AI at an unprecedented rate. I don't think there's barely anyone on the planet that's not familiar with the term now, but many of us are exploring that. Also, there are some very important protective or defensive reasons that we need to be on top of this. At the top of the list, security, privacy, and of course, the regulation really hasn't caught up to protect us in our businesses or our personal lives. So we need to be aware of what's happening. We need to be quite clear how to manage those challenges, and we need to have a point of view. At the same time, in my opinion, there are plenty of compelling offensive reasons to really be investing in AI strategy and thinking very carefully about the implications of AI for your businesses, not least of which are kind of getting productivity and increasing productivity and reducing costs, finding new sources of growth, and of course finding new ways to engage customers and solve their business problems or consumer problems as we go forward. Equally, many of your staff are kind of, on one hand, really interested in AI and looking for opportunities to apply AI to the work that they're doing. but on the other hand are afraid for their jobs, and there is a fear factor here. And some of you may be at risk as well. And we really can't let that drift, and we have to be much more disciplined about this. And finally, it's all moving very fast, and it's all very complex. And many of our old assumptions and heuristics may not hold water in this particular area. So it's really compelling and important for us to be on top of this. And finally, I just want to make the point that this area is moving very quickly, probably more quickly than your traditional strategy cycles. So it is important to start thinking very dynamically about this particular area of exploration and investing time and resource to understand what it means for you, for your business, and your competitive position. And certainly that's a factor for almost all of us. Now, this is probably my favorite slide of all time. I think the sheer compression of time to market cycles for technology in particular has really crunched in the last couple of decades. But if you look at ChatGPT in 2022 in comparison to Netflix in 1999, the time to, that should say 100 million users, 5 days. We recently had Threads launch, which also was roughly 5 days to 100 million users. This sort of time to market speed is really compelling in a sense that we can wake up in the morning and almost overnight we have these new solutions that are largely at scale and playing a significant role in reshaping the landscape of many, if not all, at some level, industries. The technology itself is accelerating at such a pace that by the time we're finished talking about this today, most of what we'll be discussing is already going to be obsolete. We're moving so quickly. There are those that believe that AI is now kind of exceeding the natural barrier or the natural rate limiter of growth, being Moore's law. And because many of the algorithms, and in particular Gen AI, is now starting to learn from itself, that pace of change and obviously the resulting complexity and the expansion of both risk and opportunity are really at an unprecedented rate. Now, I thought I'd get this out of the way because there is a lot of hype surrounding AI, and I'd say that from my personal point of view, my first real awareness of AI was in 2001: A Space Odyssey, and you can see HAL 9000 here, which is I guess the evil AI in the spaceship in 2001. And there's a wonderful moment in that film where Dave Bowman is out in his little mini spaceship and was asking Hal to come back into the mothership and asked Hal to open the pod bay doors, and the autonomous AI decided that no, he's not going to allow to do that. And so consequently, that was a situation where we had largely an example of what they call artificial general intelligence, which is not yet here with the advances that we've had around AI. They're still very algorithmically driven. But in this particular case, there was this notion that autonomous AI could operate with either a completely different set of parameters. What Hal in this case is solving for is very different from what the crew was solving for. Hal chose the mission over the crew. So that sort of backdrop has been around for 50, 60 years since Arthur C. Clarke wrote the original book that sort of gave rise to HAL in 2001. But there's been a lot of press about sort of the major, well, not the major, but the probability of things like human extinction and so forth on the back of AI, which for the most part, I just want to get that out of the way because that's really not what we're going to talk about today. And for the most part, artificial general intelligence like HAL does not yet exist and is quite a long way off. So that sort of hype is something I'd like to set aside. However, for all of us, there are some very significant issues that we need to be aware of. The ubiquity of AI is really driving a lot of risk in privacy and identity. I don't think there's probably anyone in this virtual room here who hasn't experienced AI in a call center or in a chatbot or some other mechanism that creates an interaction or an experience that may or may not compromise your privacy or create an opportunity for misadventure with your identity. So that's something we have to be really careful with. But equally, we have to be careful with that as stewards of corporate resources as well, because these models, as they become more complex and less easy to understand, potentially can create situations where we may be at risk as well in terms of the use of these tools. The second one I'd like to draw attention to is the sort of global concentration of power. This has been happening for the last couple of decades with kind of the emergence of the big five, the Apples, the Googles, the Microsofts, and so forth, where some of these very large firms are, bringing together the best technology people and really building the most sophisticated models. There's a big question about their sort of benevolence and their role in society as either in small or big ways, are going to be more and more dependent on these firms. So that's something to really keep an eye out for at kind of at a macro level, but also in terms of your own positioning as a firm. How do you align with the different different models under development, and the firms driving those models are very important strategic decisions. One thing that's come up a lot with our clients, and I should mention that this is right now our number one category of consulting project, is help us understand what's happening with AI, is moral hazard. And there's a lot of discussion about the ethics of AI and to what degree does AI have or not have a moral compass. And the conclusion that we've come to is that by definition, AI is amoral and or has the absence of morality. So the incumbent sort of idea here is that we need to be very much playing a role in guiding AI to make sure that we have built-in ethics and that whole area is well looked after, because really moral catastrophe is inevitable. It's happening already, and it's going to be very difficult to avoid the way these models are created. Of course, the biggest winner in all this are criminal enterprises and potentially amoral governments that wish to exploit AI at all of our expense, whether that be in terms of politics or economics or nefarious activity. And that's something that we need to be very careful to manage as well. And finally, as I mentioned briefly, we don't really necessarily always understand how it works, which creates just this chaotic unpredictability to AI, which really will drive unintended consequences in a lot of the decisions that we make and resources that we deploy in this area. So when you add all that up, it's essential that we're on top of how AI is evolving, and we look at sort of both the risks and the opportunities in a way that can fuel our strategy going forward. So I think it's really useful to see what's transpired in terms of how the ecosystem of AI has evolved over the last decade. You can see here, this is probably from March of 2023 as compared to 2012. You can see here, these are hundreds of organizations working in lots of different subdomains, evolving all over the world to capture this opportunity in AI, which, if you look very carefully, you can see, get some clues where the money is going to better understand where some of that investment will go and which use cases are being backed by the smart money. And I'll come to that in a little bit more detail in a moment. But you can also see the complexity of this here. I don't know if anyone on the call has their logo here, but it's accelerating and expanding at a really significant rate. We expect there'll be a crunch on this. There's been a lot of discussion about the role of AI, and how this current bubble or not will evolve. I'll come back to that in a second. But here's a little bit more nuanced view, which again gives us some clues where the investment is going, and you can kind of see in no particular order. There's a lot of investment in code and platform development, a lot of investment in data, a lot of investment in chatbots and content editing, a lot of investment in design, audio, music, arts. These are some of the areas where the early investment has really been quite concentrated, because these use cases are in some ways obvious and probably lower risk, at least in a general sense. So therefore, the kind of gestation period of many of these capabilities gives us some clues around where and how the capability will develop, and therefore how we can exploit those particular opportunities going forward. So I find this really helpful. And if you're looking over the horizon to see where AI may play the larger or smaller roles, you have to understand that those that are providing the services or the technology that underpins the AI will be a kind of a rate limiting factor. So as these use cases develop, then that requires this capability then to enter the market, and there is a gestation period for that, which will give you some clues around how soon to expect AI to play a role in your particular area of interest. There's also some tools, and this is one that we use quite a lot, Futurepedia, which are quite helpful to kind of track almost overnight the evolution of these AI tools and capabilities, and to what degree are these evolving, and of course, obviously, what use cases are they designed to address, which is really helpful. So I won't spend too much time on that, but certainly having a kind of continuous scanning capability inside your firm to make sure you're clear about what's happening is almost completely essential. Now, a lot of money is pouring into AI at the moment. This is some venture capital data that suggests that we're up 58% on 2022 in the first half, not even withstanding the Microsoft $10 billion investment in OpenAI. So is it a bubble? Does it feel like .com in 1999, 2000? I think it absolutely does. But I think the bigger question is, does it matter? Our view is that it doesn't, regardless of whether it's a bubble or not. Certainly as an investor, that will play a role for most of us. But in terms of business, there's really no doubt that the impact of AI will be transformative, regardless of whether or not the current bubble bursts. That capital will flow to the best opportunities regardless. And I think that that sort of acceleration of funding gives us some clues that that AI is certainly du jour in terms of where the investment's going. Now, at the same time, however, I think that AI really is at peak hype. This is some Gartner data that just you can see at the top of that curve. We have generative AI sitting right up there. It's very interesting. I don't have this slide here with us today, but there was a slide from late 2022 that had that further down the back of the slope here. But generative AI is really at the peak of the hype cycle. And how these cycles work is, if I can draw kind of a bit of an analogy from crypto, these technologies will evolve. We'll have a sort of a broad-based understanding of where they're at. we'll have a lot of enthusiasm about them. Initially, we'll have a lot of funding, but inevitably that's going to drop off, and we'll reach a more routine phase, and then eventually we'll have a washout of many of the of the wheat and the chaff, if you will, and we'll have a smaller number of more compelling opportunities kind of at the back end of the graph. So I expect that we're going to be riding the top of this wave for a little while. But the things I think are really interesting are, for example, data-centric AI engineering and simulation, which are, sort of emerging right now, which have a lot of industrial and in particular, a lot of economic, financial, and industrial uses that go beyond the capabilities of large language models, which to me, those are the ones that are really interesting to watch. And we also have the AI work that's being dedicated to the ethics and moral hazard question, in particular AI TRISM, responsible AI, and so forth, which are also coming up the curve in the wake of the success of Gen AI, which is kind of where we're at today. So we are at the peak hype cycle, but that doesn't change the fact that we need to be really focused on understanding the implications of AI for our firms. This is some McKinsey data, which is kind of helping us to better understand the divide between peak AI and then what's happening on the ground. And relatively fewer firms are all into AI. Only 33% of companies are using Gen AI in at least one functional area. Less than 20% have Gen AI on the board's agenda. And slightly more, maybe double that, are planning to make some investments in the future. But if you look functionally, you can see where the majority of focus is here. Marketing and sales, product development, service, and risk use cases are sort of at the top. But these are sort of 14%, 13%, 10%, and 4% of firms respectively. So I would say this data suggests very much that firms are being quite cautious in their investment in AI and are really largely in an experimental phase, which is good news for most of us who are still a little bit more deliberative about our AI investments and taking our time to better understand, which areas are going to emerge, how will we deal with security and risk and other issues as this unfolds, and how do we sort of bring that into the flow of our more traditional operations. It's a real factor. So I think that what's happening on the ground is adoption is really concentrated in that sort of innovator, early adopter segment, and hasn't really quite, at least in business, reached any sort of early majority. So that's quite good. However, this is some Accenture data that suggests that most of us are in the experimenter category. The AI innovators and achievers, sort of that those statistics line up pretty well with the McKinsey data. And so we're still in this speculative phase a little bit, where many of us are still experimenting. Some of us have mature AI strategies. Some of us have taken that another level and have quite differentiated AI strategies. And certain others of us are hedging for the future and building capabilities that will help us develop AI in the future. But you can see here also how quickly the expected maturity, if you will, on an industry basis, this might evolve from where we are today. And that's at least indicative in terms of the pace that we're expecting this change to unfold over a relatively short period. Now, I thought it might be useful to share a view, which is kind of in different industries where we might expect to see disruption at scale in over a period of time. And I've sort of laid this out here to share a perspective, which is based on our data. And you can see here on the x-axis where you can kind of call that the degree of disruption. and the time frame here on the x-axis. And those in the blue, the art, software development, entertainment, journalism, customer service, even professional services a little bit. These are the areas that are accelerating quite quickly. You probably came across the industrial action in Los Angeles with the Actors Guild and so forth. And you've seen some of the examples of, for example, photo competitions being won by AI, by AI in various arts competitions and so forth. So in some sectors of the economy, this is very real and will have transformative disruption right now over the next couple of years. And in other sectors, sort of if you go to the right hand, upper right hand here, education, defense, aerospace, healthcare, and so forth, where AI will play a role in transformative change at a system level. But those industries are already undergoing transformative change, and AI will play a role in hopefully accelerating some of that change. But that'll be on a longer boil. Then in the middle here we have, I think, some very vulnerable sectors of the economy, in particular banking, finance, and insurance, government services, professional services, again, where security, AI security plays a big role. And then most of us fit probably in the green and the gray, where AI will play a role in part of the picture or part of the model. And really the role that AI will play will be to help us drive down the cost curve in particular parts of our business, and potentially offer new sources of growth and growth opportunities. So I think it's really important, depending on kind of which industry sector you are and where you fit, to make sure that you have a bit of a fit for purpose AI strategy that sets the objective function to either defend against disruption, that's sort of the blue, and in that case, you're sort of seeking alternative business models to identify new ways to compete in the wake of this change, or in the green, where you're really understand that your core model will be robust for a period of time, but there's lots of opportunities to use AI to create new sources of competitive advantage, growth, and reduce cost, and so forth. So I think it's really important to understand where you fit, and then place your bets and make your investments accordingly, and then obviously continue to iterate as you go forward, because as I mentioned, this will be obsolete very quickly. Another thing I think is really interesting, looking at it from the point of view of functional roles, a lot of the work that's been done in terms of enabling AI use cases in particular has been aimed at turbocharging or empowering particular functional capabilities. And I think the sort of, if we look at this from a kind of an operating model perspective, administration, IT and coding, customer service, and marketing is kind of the first cab off the rank, really, in terms of disruption of professional categories. And we make a bold statement here that if you are in one or all of those areas, then there's a really significant need to reinvent. But also, if you're a general manager, a CEO, or a functional manager, really understanding the role of AI, the role that AI plays in these particular areas is quite important as well. And in the purple, legal, finance and risk, engineering, product development, there are a lot of emerging use cases for each of these areas, but there's also a relatively high degree of risk. So consequently, what's going to happen is that the more transactional, lower end capability will be picked off. And of course, the opportunity for people in that particular part of the tapestry of the organization needs to keep moving upstream and seeking more value added, and seeking to use those tools to reduce cost, automate, or improve productivity of the routine work. And then there are going to be some areas that are particularly safe for a relatively long period of time. People turning wrenches in maintenance, or tradespeople, for example. there are certain activities that are really quite human, but even those roles, if you think about tradespeople using AI to improve their productivity or reduce administrative time and things like that will play a role. But for probably most of us here who are either general managers or board, the big question is kind of how do we lead and manage all this, and how do we think differently about how we create our operating models, how those business models evolve, and fundamentally, how do we lead differently, manage differently? And I think there's a lot of gray area there that requires a tremendous amount of work. So our view is that unfortunately, general management and the board, in particular, will take longer as we wash through this current generation of leaders to fundamentally rethink how they operate. And AI probably won't play a significant transformative role in terms of how those functions are undertaken in any particular organization, at least in the short term. So we'll see how that plays out. I'm sure we could find a dozen people that would disagree with that, but I think there are some structural issues that sort of limit the rate of change in leadership. Now, looking at that, though, is kind of like, where do we start in terms of we think about our strategy? If we go back to the chart that I shared in terms of the industry adoption of AI and to what degree will that drive disruption, I think if you're in the purple, the big thinking required is to think about, number 4 here. I'll go in reverse order. Is that AI and related technologies are likely to create some long-term wholesale disruption of that industry segment, but it's going to take a long time. And consequently, thinking about it early is really important. And on the other end, if you're in the green, I think for the short term, we're going to see more of the same, but what AI is going to really provide opportunities to do what we do already, but better, faster, cheaper, and of course, open up opportunities for growth that we may not have seen. And if you're in the red, the gray, or the blue, there's some level of in between where the blue is really all about identifying alternative business models and building up new use cases, and of course in the red, kind of looking at the unbundling of different capability and how that might come back together. So I think all of us can identify opportunities to pull short-term costs and improve productivity, but some of the bigger questions in certain industry sectors will be quite significant. But it's very difficult to see how anyone can avoid most or all of these steps going forward. Now, this is going to take me a minute to explain, but we've created what we're describing as the AI change formula, which once I explain this, hopefully you can understand how to best really gather insight around how quickly AI will replace a current capability or a current set of use cases that are in place in your organization or have had some durability to them. And generally speaking, for AI, any AI solution or really any technology solution to replace the status quo, i.e. what we're already doing today, we have to reach a point where it's somehow better and it addresses a set of key issues. So in this case, for AI to replace a particular use case, we have to have confidence that AI is going to offer something better. And that confidence is really a function of these 4 things. So first, security and privacy. So if AI puts us in a compromised position relative to compliance or copyrights or plagiarism or just general security and personal privacy, we won't make those investments. If AI is not accurate, in other words, if AI doesn't provide really repeatable and correct results in areas that may or may not be high or low risk, we won't make those investments to replace the status quo either. And there's some McKinsey data that suggests that about 56% of corporates see this as the number one risk, is in terms of how accurate or how reliable is the data that's coming out of the Gen AI large language models that are developing now. And next off the rank is ethics. So this is the moral hazard issue. And will we cause harm in particular as a result of the advice or the interactions created in AI? And then fundamentally, as with all technology displacement, the solution has to be lower cost or at least higher performance relative to the substitutes. And the interesting thing here in this equation is if any one of these is zero, they're all zero, and we won't make the investment. So I find this really helpful if we're looking at any or a particular use case, whether that be, let's take, for example, replacing paralegals with AI. If we sort of apply this equation, if there's security risk or accuracy risk or ethics risk, or AI doesn't offer a lower cost or higher performance against the paralegal, then we're not going to make that investment, and it'll stay in the experimental stage until these conditions are met. And I think this equation can be applied to almost any use case, and may also have additional variables that you could factor in. But the main point is that we won't see the change until these issues are resolved. Now, looking at this through a different lens, how do we know whether a particular change is going to scale? Well, the first thing is that we need to have use cases that offer a compelling alternative at the beginning, right? So, and those have to be able to scale. And to scale them, we need to be able to have a sense that there's enough adoption possibility for a particular use case to reach that scale. So one interesting analogy here, I mentioned it briefly earlier, if we look at crypto and blockchain, for example, particularly blockchain, which was largely a technology looking for a use case. AI is very different in a sense that the use cases are almost infinite, and AI can be applied in almost an infinite number of applications, which then means that we have a little bit better balance of the technology and the use cases. So if we have that opportunity to scale, that's one of the two basic requirements. And the second one is that we have to be able to, there has to be scalable business model that will attract labor and capital in enough quantity to displace the existing economic value propositions. Now, this is really the rate limiter. And if you go back to the earlier slide that I mentioned that showed the AI ecosystem and the different investments being made in different functional categories, for example, that's where we look for clues. Are there actually business models that are gathering steam, and is the capital and labor going into those business models? So when you sort of make that comparison between a particular application of AI and where the smart money is going, is there a use case and a business model? That gives us some clues around the likely adoption curve of the technology. And on that basis, looking at, sort of doing a kind of a comprehensive ocean drain on the different investments are being made. Right now, most of the use cases are concentrated in a relatively small set of small areas, the low-hanging fruit, if you will, and the rest of it is very speculative and it has not yet demonstrated for example, a high probability of scaling. So which really all means is that we have more time than we think we might have otherwise thought to sort of work through some of these things. But if you're in marketing or in coding or in recruitment or in customer services, this stuff is on your doorstep, and there's already labor, capital, use cases, and everything ready to go. If you're a brain surgeon, or if you're a tradesperson, or you're in consumer products, you're kind of a bit further out on the curve, but that doesn't mean you're functional. Then you're sort of starting to look at functional use cases, and it becomes more of an efficiency becomes more of an efficiency issue for you. Okay, now I'll leave this in the pack. I'll make it available for you if you're interested in watching the replay. We've looked at and this is just 8 of probably 20 different sectors, and we're tracking the use cases in each of these sectors to better understand what's sort of unfolding. And there are use cases that are hitting the ground in almost every sector, but they tend to be quite different. So, in agriculture, it's about weather, farm equipment, crop protection. Financial services is about fraud and customer service. In recruitment, it's about everything. In distribution, it's about optimization. In healthcare, it's about diagnosis. In legal, it's about, again, everything, but it'll take a little bit longer. And so it really depends on kind of where you are in your particular industry life cycle. We've done some work to develop an AI readiness index to sort of help firms calibrate where their capabilities need to develop and where they're at today and where they need to be in the future. I won't spend too much time on this, but basically, we've identified 20 different capability typologies that firms need to really focus attention on. And we've found that with the clients that we've worked with so far, most are a reasonably long way off on most of them. So there is a lot of work to be done to be thinking about how you build readiness into your strategy and how you start building the muscle and those capabilities that will be pivotal in terms of your ability to absorb AI and then manage the change on the back end of AI implementation. And for many of us, we have sort of core systems constraints as well that'll play a big role in our readiness for adoption as well, as these things aren't necessarily designed with APIs that can bring this capability on demand into our business models, and of course our security and risk protocols, which play a role in that as well. So there's a lot of work to be done at that sort of fundamental level to kind of work those issues through. So just a reminder, why do you need to build AI into your strategy? Well, your competition it's still bubbling away. It's been slow, but it's likely to accelerate. You're probably already behind, certainly at a global level, and your customers are driving this change as much as your competition. So you do need to be on top of that. Security, privacy, et cetera, moral hazard. We've got to be aware of this stuff because we cannot live in a bubble. We don't live in a bubble, and these things are going to be on our door regardless. But most importantly, the offensive opportunity is here. In the land of the blind, the one-eyed man is king, as they say. There's a lot of opportunity for us to create new sources of competitive advantage, find new sources of growth, and potentially win the cost curve game if we're really clever with this stuff. And of course, your staff we live in a global labor constrained market. Your staff is both intrigued and worried for the long term. You need to play a role as a leader in playing that and making that work. And of course, you need to build this you need to build AI into your strategy, but remember it's subordinate to your strategy. It is not a strategy on its own, in a sense that AI does not live in an island. Like any technology, it's there to enable your strategy, but there are lots of opportunities to use AI and related technologies to accelerate parts of your strategy to, as I said, create some competitive advantage in the near term. Now, in terms of what we do, we have a number of areas in our firm that touch these issues. In particular, AI strategy, as I mentioned, this is one of our most kind of prevalent case study areas right now, where we're working with a number of clients on this issue, bringing together AI, digital strategy, and functional strategy. I'll share the game theory bit in a minute. We've also created some leadership experiences to help leaders better understand AI, and importantly, understand that you're not on an island. So this is a very much an ecosystem issue, in a sense that on the supply and the demand side, how our decisions will propagate through our ecosystems is really important. Of course, we do a lot of work in business model design and use case discovery, so that's an area of our focus as well. And in terms of innovation readiness, getting your teams and the people inside your organizations to better embrace how these changes will play a role is another area of focus for us. So, and I know many of you here today have worked with us on at least one of these areas, and others are new, but this is an area that we spend a lot of time working in. And in particular, we find that a number of our clients have been asking us to do the work around future casting AI to understand what's around the corner. And we've created a series of bespoke, customized, and general war game experiences that we've been running to help understand how a particular ecosystem in a particular industry is going to respond and react to these different changes, but at the same time create a really compelling learning experience for leadership and general managers in a high pressure environment. And people seem to really like it. So I thought I'd share that with you as well. And the other thing that keeps coming up in these game experiences are the role of AI ethics and so forth. And we've been able to scale that to work with teams as small as 20 people and up to 300 people to help really confront these issues and to create a wider understanding of the role of AI and when it might affect your particular business. You can kind of think of it like as a large, complex, but highly interactive innovation jam. Okay. Are you looking? Now, before we go to Q&A, I just want to say that there is some time, but not a lot of time to start really putting your mind share to this issue. And I think now is the time before it gets out of hand to really, you have a little bit of time to be deliberative and start really thinking hard about how AI is going to affect your business, and then how you can create cycles to gather that learning and apply that learning in a way that's probably much faster than your traditional strategy cycle. So I think there's some time to spend that 55 minutes to really understand where that opportunity is. And in 12, 18, 24 months, you're going to be reactive, because this is all going to be moving much more quickly than we can manage. And in that same sort of vein, don't be caught in the headlights. The best thing you can do now is start making decisions and start deploying your resources. And the worst thing you can do is sit on your hands thinking that this doesn't apply to us, and we're not likely to feel the impacts of AI at least in the middle term. And for some of you, that'll be the right decision, but none of you can bank on that. So I think really do nothing is not an option in this particular example. But I don't want to overstate the hype. There are lots of opportunities to be captured here. There's lots of risks to be managed, but if you're not in one of those sort of highly disruption, high likelihood of disruption industry sectors or functions, then there is some time to think carefully about how best to use this capability to improve your advantage. So I'll stop there. My details are here, and what I'll do is jump off the PowerPoint and maybe open it up for Q&A and discussions. And you, of course, can come back to me offline if you like, and either request the recording or provide any additional feedback that you might have or questions that you might have as well. So I'll just open it up for questions, either via the chat or the Q&A, and we'll see where we go. Anyone? All right. So if there are no questions, I might ask myself a question. One thought would be that, how much investment should we be thinking about putting into this particular area, and what does that investment look like? I think, again, it depends on which industry sector you might be in, of course, which functional area you represent. But I think that rather than thinking of it as a separate investment, I would say that AI is one of those things that's kind of a horizontal investment. And what I mean by that is it's unlikely to just touch one. It's not an IT thing per se. It's not a marketing thing per se. Most of our AI investments will cut across the fabric of our operating models. So consequently, the general manager in particular needs to play a role in thinking deeply and engaging with their teams around um, where best to deploy those resources to drive AI innovation. Thank you, Ian, for bailing me out here. Let me just see if I can open that question. Right. Yep. So, Ian, that's a great question. I'm going to come back to one of the charts here so what Ian's asking is, what are the main tools we should be looking at to stay abreast of AI? Most of us are thinking ChatGPT, but ChatGPT is limited to a particular area. So I'm going to put the Gartner slide back up here for a second, and that will give you some clues around where you might see opportunity. And now I don't have time to go through all these all at once, but what I can do is if anyone's interested, I can come back to you with a summary of some or all of these different tools that are coming. So this chart right here, Ian, represents probably a reasonable universe of different AI disciplines, some of which are incredibly nuanced and very niche, um, and some of which are quite a long way off. Neurosymbolic AI and artificial general intelligence are, maybe decades away. But for example, what I'd be looking at sort of at the very beginning would be data-centric AI, engineering, simulation are the three areas that I think probably have the most broad-based implications for most businesses. And data-centric AI is largely doing what generative AI is doing, but except for with large data sets. So you can kind of think about the analytical implications of imagine if you were able to put all of your spreadsheets in the history of your company in one place and ask the AI to understand the patterns that you can't see, the non-obvious patterns. Then imagine if you're able to put all the data like that in the universe into the model, and then step back and look at it that way. With engineering, similarly, suppose you want to design a bridge, putting in a certain objective function around factor of safety, around I don't know, torsional strength, around concrete, whatever it might be, and using the tools to create engineering scenario outcomes, which is really interesting. Simulation and like supply chain and logistics capability, using AI to help better understand how to optimize large, complex problem sets. Those are probably the ones that I think are the most interesting. And of course, decision intelligence in terms of interrogating both language and data that play a role as well. But there's a lot of scope to think um, to start preparing yourself. And as I mentioned before, where is it? There are some tools that you can use to start building up your general knowledge of this particular area, Futurepedia being one of them. Hope that answered your question. Um, Yes. Okay. Martin had a question about to what degree do we think that organizations are risk of their own IP becoming consumed by others? I'd say that risk is pretty high because largely almost anything we put into the model ends up in the model. Now, the good news is it gets lost in the model in a sense that it just becomes ones and zeros in a very large sea of ones and zeros. But I think at this stage, particularly with the ChatGPT technology, which is both open source and ubiquitously available, anything you put in there will be fed into the model. So that is a risk. And although Microsoft, for example, has developed some tools called Copilot, which will be really the core idea there is that those will be constrained to the walls of your own data. and that ideally won't jump the firewall, but that is always a risk, Martin. So being very clear about your security and privacy policy, but at the same time not putting your foot so far onto the brake that you're not able to make the investments required to stay ahead. It's a very tricky knife edge to sort of walk. In software engineering space, do you see programmers being replaced by AI in the next 10 years? Niels, good question. It depends on what you read. I think that there is some data out there that suggests that up to 40% of the coding that's happening today in particularly the large corporates is being generated by AI. So 40% is a big number. When you say 10 years, I could see that number increasing next year to 50 and the year after that to 60 and so on. I do think coding is an area that is going to shift from asking, less about the people doing the coding and more about people asking intelligent questions of the technology doing the coding. And I really think that that's a vulnerable industry. And it is interesting because, I know with my kids, for example, we were really quite focused on, although it was completely unsuccessful, we were quite focused on getting them some exposure to coding. And then, particularly my older boys, like, Dad, that's obsolete already. The AI is going to be doing that stuff. And, what I really need to be able to do is be able to hire the best talent or assemble the best capability. And I think that'll be the role of the coder in the future. Got time maybe for one more question, and we might wrap up. But thank you all for joining us today and for your questions. Oh, okay. One more question from Andrew. The impact on marketing. Look, I think more broadly, marketing and comms in particular is right now one of the major use cases that where a lot of money is going into. So in the short term, copy editing, the images, Canva has AI built in, the advertising, even deep fakes are playing a role where AI is playing a role, for example, in dead celebrities being created to create promotional materials and advertisements. Marketing is the other area is in terms of customer analytics and, for example, progressive profiling. There's a lot of work being done in AI in that particular area. I think the role of marketing is going to change very significantly. But right now, these capabilities are super enabling in a sense that it's allowing it's allowing marketing to play a much more strategic role than perhaps previously, because as we well know that in the world of omni-channel, it's very difficult for the human to maintain sort of contact across all these channels, everything, everywhere, all at once. So marketing is definitely changing. I'm out of time, so I can't tease it out much more, Andrew, but happy to talk to you offline about it. So thank you, everyone, very much. And I might wrap up here. And as I mentioned, you'll receive a follow-up email with the link for today's talk and an invitation to come back to us to ask specific questions and/or raise your own concerns or comments offline. So have a great day, everyone. We look forward to engaging in the future.